BaptistHealth.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or BaptistJax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning and welcome to the Friday edition of First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler, and our expert media panel is here to discuss the week's top headlines. Among them, a fresh subpoena officially draws the former mayor's lobbying firm under the state attorney's investigative umbrella. We'll also be discussing why the governor is adding to the legislature's to-do list despite its inability to accomplish its sole statutory task, and why the promised size of the UF graduate campus downtown might not be as large as some hope. Finally, we'll talk about the racist comments of a local county commissioner and a guilty verdict for a city council chambers protester. Later in the program, you're invited to the cookout. We'll tell you what's on the grill at James Weldon Johnson Park this weekend. Join the conversation. You can reach us on air by calling 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the other ways to connect with us. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump has suggested that a second round of talks between the U.S. and Iran could happen in Pakistan. Yesterday, he also said the conflict could soon end. But NPR's Quill Lawrence says the U.S. military is still building up forces in the region.
The U.S. is blocking ships from exiting or entering Iranian ports and strangling Iran's economy that way. That blockade is an act of war, but in this case, it's really maybe just part of the negotiations with Iran. At yesterday's Pentagon news briefing, maybe aimed to sort of push these negotiations, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said that the blockade is the polite way this can go.
NPR's Quill Lawrence reporting. Meanwhile, the leaders of Britain and France are holding a meeting with other countries' leaders about how to protect shipping when the strait just opens. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister has just posted online that the Strait of Hormuz is, quote, completely open. He says this is for the remaining period of the Lebanon-Israel ceasefire. Iran's ambassador to the United Nations says his country is cautiously optimistic about potential peace talks with the U.S. He also says the U.S. has betrayed past diplomatic negotiations. Reporter Duri Buskarin spoke with Iranians who are crossing the border into Turkey. She found mixed reactions about the prospect of renewed talks.
The airspace is still closed in Iran, so hundreds of people here have spent hours on a bus to reach the Turkish border. NPR is not using their names due to the risk of arrest when they return to Iran. An older woman from Isfahan says she thinks both sides should lower their expectations in the negotiations. She hopes they're successful. War is a bad thing, she says, but if someone slaps you, we will slap them back. A young man on his way back to his job in Central Europe disagrees.
I just want they to continue bombing till this regime goes away.
He says he'd rather live in Iran and speak his own language.
And whoever I spoke to, they have the same idea. They say, why the ceasefire? We don't want it.
For NPR News, I'm Duri Buskarin in Van, Turkey.
Meanwhile, a 10-day ceasefire announced by President Trump and agreed on by Lebanon and Israel has begun. Barrages of gunshots, however, rang out across Beirut early today. Residents were firing into the air to celebrate the first day of the truce. The two neighboring countries held their first direct diplomatic talks in decades earlier this week in Washington. That's after more than a month of war between Israel and the Iran-backed Lebanon-based Hezbollah militant group. They're a proxy of Iran. The truce, if it holds, could boost attempts to extend the ceasefire among Iran, the United States, and Israel after weeks of devastating war. This is NPR.
Good morning. You're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan has filed the paperwork to run for a second term as mayor. She enters the race without a major Republican challenger declaring they're running yet. But news partners at the Jacksonville Daily Record report current Republican State Representative Wyman Duggan is considering a run for the position. Deegan says her message for the 2027 race remains the same.
Quality of life has always been job one. And what we have tried to do through our town hall meetings, and there have been dozens of those, is listen to the community, find out what the top needs and desires are to do with their tax dollars, and make sure that we are creating the best return on investment for those dollars. We'll continue to do that, but we're hearing a lot of the same things. Keep investing in infrastructure, keep investing in small business, keep investing in those communities that have been under-resourced.
Deegan hopes to become the first Democratic mayor to win re-election in Jacksonville since 1983 when Jake Godbold won. 2 lanes will be closed once again this weekend on the Buckman Bridge on the drive from Mandarin into Orange Park. The lanes on I-295 North will be closed from 10 tonight and reopen by 4 Monday morning. The closures are needed for crews to work on replacing the bridge's steel joints. This weekend, the ramp from San Jose Boulevard to the West Beltway North will be closed as well. Work on the project is expected to wrap up later this year. It is a warm end to the work week here in Northeast Florida. Temperatures will eventually reach the low to mid 90s inland. It'll be in the upper 80s to lower 90s out at the beaches. We'll have dry conditions and clear skies through the day.
Support for NPR comes from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
New state budget delays, an expanding JEA investigation, and just how many students are promised at the UF campus downtown. Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler, and it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, the governor calls lawmakers back to Tallahassee and piles more on their plate. Prosecutors widen their scope into JEA to include former utility lobbyists. The city's UF graduate campus could be more modest than what many are hoping. A local lawmaker doubles down on his racist comments. And a protester is convicted after disrupting a city council meeting. To talk about all that and more, I am joined by Nate Monroe, executive editor at the Florida Trib. Good morning, Nate.
Good morning, Ann.
We're also joined by Obi Umana, attorney and political consultant. Hi, Obi.
Good morning.
Christina Burgess, reporter at First Coast News. Welcome back, Christina.
Good morning, Ann.
And David Bauerlein, Metro reporter at the Florida Times-Union. Hi, David.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning for all of you. Thanks for being here. Nate, I want to start with a story that you reported at the Florida Trib. JEA received a subpoena last Friday, a week ago, looking for a bunch of information in addition to their previous subpoena to the council president. Catch us up to speed on what's happening there.
Yeah, so last week, the state attorney's office sent JEA a subpoena. And when that happens, reporters like public agencies getting subpoenas because they're public records and they're discoverable. And the state attorney was asking for in some ways what seemed like a follow-up to the subpoena to Kevin Carrico, the council president, some records of any conversations involving the council president, records of any conversations among the board of directors about JEA's CEO, Vicky Cavey, and records of any communications with Ballard, which is a very well-known and prominent lobbying firm that among other people, employs the former mayor of Jacksonville, Lenny Curry.
And remind us why we're starting to see subpoenas. How did this whole thing begin?
Yeah, I mean, really the entire kind of public acrimony about JEA has its origins in several weeks ago, revelations that the council president, Kevin Carrico, described his decision to appoint his boss at the Boys and Girls Club of Northeast Florida to the board as a favor for a friend, the friend being his boss. That, I think, struck people as a kind of shockingly flippant and curious way to describe a council member appointing someone to a board or nominating someone to a board. And it appears like it prompted the state attorney's office to subpoena Kevin Carrico's records to find out what does this mean?
Yeah, and Carrico responded to this public criticism with some accusations of his own. He accused JEA and specifically the CEO there of fostering a racist and toxic culture at JEA. And so that's all part of this expanding investigation. So this council investigation is happening, David. JEA is doing its own investigation. You had to attend a few meetings this week on that front. So what is the council currently looking at in its special investigatory committee into JEA?
Sure. They're looking at really two basic things. One, is there a toxic workplace culture under the CEO, Vicky Cavey? So they're going to do a survey of employees, or plan to do a survey of top employees to find out their views. They've also invited in Vicky Cavey and some other top administrators. They'll be coming in to testify. And so that's one area they're looking at. Is there some dysfunctional, toxic workplace culture there that should be concerning to city council and customers, ratepayers? And the second thing they're looking at is this issue of capacity fees, and it's a very complex type thing, but basically a big commercial developer comes in, they pay a capacity fee for their impact on the growth of the system, and then a few years go by, they continue to develop, and there's supposed to be a process in place then to trigger a look back at whether that developer or customer needs to then pay an additional capacity fee because they've grown more or using more water and sewer than originally was projected. And so that has not happened with some large commercial customers. So the city council committee also is looking into that. Now, the other thing that they're not looking into, supposedly, Ballard Partners and a contract that Ballard Partners had with JEA that was not renewed for a second year in January. And so Ballard Partners is also kind of, its name is coming up as well in that committee's investigation. The backstory there is that there's some criticism that by the mayor, who's saying that there was a smear campaign against the CEO, Vicky Cavey, after she decided not to renew the Ballard Partners contract. And that's her view of what's motivating this.
And the mayor sort of acknowledging that her office might have expressed some dismay about the existence of that contract, given Lenny Curry's appointment of Aaron Zahn back in the day, who tried to privatize JEA. And she's sort of saying, why would JEA have this contract with a lobbyist that has a representative that includes somebody that was involved in what ultimately spiraled into a big scandal? And
exactly. So you have a Ballard Partners contract where on the one hand, the mayor's saying because the CEO didn't renew it, that caused a smear campaign against her. On the other hand, you have the former chief of staff for JEA told this investigative committee of city council the pressure was coming from the mayor's office for us to not renew it. And, it was a contract that was done, by the book in terms of being awarded, and they were doing basically federal lobbying for us and doing a good job because they're very well connected to the Trump administration, and that's why they wanted to get a lobbying firm in place to do that.
I want to play a little bit from Tuesday's meeting of this special investigatory committee. Rory Diamond really kind of led the questioning of former board chair Joe DeSalvo. He's still a board member at JEA, and he was asked about a February 20 press conference. This was where the mayor spoke, Vicky Cavey spoke, responding to these allegations of a racist and toxic workplace. Joe DeSalvo, the board chair at the time, was there, and Diamond asked him why he attended that presser. Let's take a listen.
Did you go to the press conference with the intent of supporting Vicky Cavey?
Absolutely, and also the intent of putting down what I still say is a drama not created by JEA, which some members here have said before at the last SIC meeting. We didn't create this drama. This drama started within City Council on that press conference announcing the need for this SIC. That's where the drama started.
So this is, DeSalvo taking a pretty strong position, Obi. And, what's interesting and came up in this meeting, but also sort of occurs to me, is just the level of council involvement in JEA. I am old enough to remember a time, certainly under like the Delaney and Payton administrations, where everything was like government needs to run like a business. And now you have this sort of increasing involvement, whether it's at JEA or the Aviation Authority or DIA, where the city council is kind of weighing in. They want to choose who's going to lead. They want to interfere with the budget. They want to make decisions. In this case, they're doing employee surveys to determine employee satisfaction. What's changed?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I think have changed. I mean, like you said, back in the day, these were independent organizations, and they were supposed to be run as such. What I think City Council is trying to do is they know that these entities affect their citizens' daily lives, and so they want to show up and say that they were a factor in them. I don't know if this particular JEA situation is all motivated by wanting to do the best by the city. Obviously, we're still not sure what Carrico meant by favor, if he meant favor to the person he was appointing or favor to a lobbying group. And so I think what we're finding, though, is City Council starting to spread their wings a little bit about what they can be involved in.
Yeah. Christina, this questioning got also off on some sort of, I wouldn't call them necessarily conspiratorial, but sort of other tracks of questioning that maybe just got a little silly. At one point, Rory Diamond was asking about a photograph that was taken of Joe DeSalvo, the board chair, and the CEO, Vicky Cavey, sitting in the audience at this press conference, this very public press conference, and said that the photograph appeared to show them holding hands. He asked, were they holding hands? Joe DeSalvo said that's absurd. But I think it sort of spoke to the kind of really broad net that the city council is casting here in terms of the questions that they're asking and that they want answers to.
Yeah, I want to say when I attended I want to say it was the first special investigatory committee meeting, kind of to your point you were saying earlier, Councilman Carlucci, who was one of the members that were just sitting in to listen, and he even said how he feels like this should be business that's handled with the JEA board, people who are already placed in those positions. And he did feel like, as a council member, that they were kind of overstepping. And I feel like when it does get into lines of questioning like that as well from Council Member Diamond, it's kind of teeter-totters. And it's like, how will these answers also help towards getting answering the questions that we need to actually answer?
Yeah. Some very potentially consequential things that they're asking of JEA. Certainly they're looking, Nate, to eventually this special committee to interview their human resources director, their chief administrative officer. Ultimately, they want to interview Vicky Cavey. All of this is happening under oath. But they also asked JEA, the board members, to waive their attorney-client privilege with their former attorney, who is under the Office of General Counsel, Regina Ross. And they want to talk to her about presumably some HR complaints that she may or may not have been privy to, but that would seem to be a concerning precedent, and certainly the JEA board has pushed back on that.
There really is a kind of merry-go-round like quality to this whole JEA controversy. Again, this started with Carrico kind of getting his hand caught in the cookie jar. His response to his controversy was to throw out these accusations about a toxic and racist culture. He has not explained what he meant by that. So he forms a committee. It's initially about this workplace culture. They start to investigate that a little bit. There's a public hearing. The CEO's former chief of staff testifies in public about the workplace culture. I don't think he really spoke to anything that anyone viewed as any real misconduct. So then the energy kind of shifted to this capacity fee issue. Maybe JEA is not collecting the amount of money it should. Well, we kind of find out maybe some of that is actually the city's fault, going back decades when it ran the water and sewer system. And in any case, there's not a lot of appetite to go after some of these big water users like Mayo, who are kind of at issue in that. So then the energy shifted this week to questions about a natural gas plant. And maybe JEA is not spending money, or there's some irregularity in the way they're spending money pursuing this natural gas plant, which has been a very public project now for several years. Like, it would not be unreasonable for a listener hearing all of this stuff, feeling like they're in a hall of mirrors, to think that this is kind of a stand-in or a proxy for broader disputes between the Republican-controlled city council and its leadership and the Democratic mayor.
Well, to be clear, this investigatory committee started because the council's, or rather the inspector general, wanted to take a look at some issues, asked the council president whether he could leverage their auditor's function, the council auditor's office. And in addition to, or perhaps instead of doing that, this committee was created. And as you said, now this week they're adding whether or not this natural gas plant is appropriate or being managed properly, it appears to have been added to their investigatory agenda. It does seem to be a kind of continuing mission.
It does. And like I said, it's sort of like, I mean, the way this seems to have worked is, I mean, again, the toxic workplace culture was supposed to be the big thing. And now, like, well, that's quite narrow now. Now it's like not even about the 2,000 plus employees. It's kind of about this sliver of like C-suite people and whether there's an issue there. And, you know, again, I mean, I feel like listeners, you know, it's easy to get lost in this conversation because what's sort of been missing from all of this is like, what is the end game here? Mm-hmm. What is anyone like, what is the prescription that we're working toward? Like, what needs to happen? What is the,
I mean, ultimately the city council would probably at best make some recommendations, right? I mean, they don't really have any authority to do much other than manage board appointments.
Right. But I mean, like recommendations, you know, don't have a toxic workplace culture. Like, you know, I don't understand, you know, what is the end game?
Yeah. I mean, and that's sort of what we heard from Councilmember Pittman this week. Obie just sort of saying in her comments, you know, please take a look at this. You know, that was her ask.
Yeah. And I'll speak to the attorney-client privilege thing. I think it's going to be problematic if this is going to be the continuing case, because a lot of times these conversations are to prevent something bad from happening. And if the client doesn't feel that they can talk to their attorney about something bad happening, bad things end up happening. And I think having this kind of precedent that we will now be able to waive this or ask them to waive anytime they want, I think this is going to be problematic and it'll lead to worse things happening.
If you're just joining us, we're talking about the week's headlines with Nate Monroe, Obie Umana, Christina Burgess, and David Bauerlein. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find all the ways to connect with us on social. We have a question from Susan on Facebook. David, I might direct this towards you, saying, does Ballard, that's the Ballard Partners firm lobbyist, represent FP&L? Do they represent Florida Power and Light?
They do. They represent NextEra. So they have a roster of clients across the globe, really, but a number of them in Florida. And it includes NextEra/Florida, which is the parent company of Florida Power and Light.
And would there be any conflict in them representing JEA and FPL, given the fact that FPL was sort of the lead bidder on taking over JEA? Or is that just areas that lobbyists have sort of a knowledge of, and perhaps there's shared universal interests in lobbying?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know that there would be a conflict necessarily. Maybe there could be, depending on what the issue. I mean, obviously lobbyists are representing clients before government agencies usually. So if there's an issue, say, that NextEra wants, and that's to the benefit of NextEra, but to the detriment of JEA, does that become a conflict of interest or vice versa? But they have been simultaneously representing both and still do represent both. I mean, JEA is represented by Ballard at state level government for basically water regulatory type issues, and continues to obviously to represent NextEra on electric issues.
All right, we've got a call from Todd in Jacksonville Beach. Good morning, Todd. Go ahead.
Oh, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. You asked what should be the end game for the city council committee, and to me it should be to investigate and then abandon this proposed gas plant. The city was presented a year ago with a wonderful alternative. An independent research organization called RMI gave a proposal to use a combination of energy efficiency, battery storage, and solar at a far lower cost than this plant was proposed to not need this plant. And this JEA's never held public hearings to review the RMI proposal, and that's what I think the city council should require: public hearings on an energy-efficient alternative to this terrible natural gas plant. I'm a doctor. The air pollution is going to cost our state $1 billion in healthcare over the next 30 years. We need to reconsider this.
Todd, thanks. It's interesting, Christina, because after this meeting this week, the former board chair, Joe DeSalvo, said that the questions about this plant really came out of left field for him. He said that he'd heard nothing in terms of complaints or concerns about how the plant is happening, except for people like the Sierra Club, who've raised real concerns about what the priorities are here. Should JEA be focusing more on, clean energy sources, as Todd says, solar power, things that are renewable and less damaging to the planet.
Yeah, I think that's something that now, I think with the question being brought up, the focus could be put on that, especially now that we're also hearing people in our community and residents are also mentioning that it could be important.
Yeah. We've got a call from Rick on the west side. Good morning, Rick. Go ahead.
Hi. I wanted to kind of speak to everybody regarding the euphemistic language that has come to be so common in discussing things that are obviously wrong, illegal, and improper. A perfect example is the gentleman, not that I disagree, but the gentleman who described Carrico's actions as getting his hand caught in the cookie jar. What should have been said was he's using public resources to repay private, political and career debts. You need to call something what it is. The same thing's happening on a state and national level. Nobody really says, calls a spade, as the old saying goes. And that includes everybody I've heard speak this morning. It's time to start speaking in clear language to the people. Imagine the hubris and the arrogance that it takes for Mr. Carrico to say such a thing and then refuse to say what this favor was.
Rick, thanks for your comments. Nate, do you care to respond to that or address it?
I mean, I've never been accused. That might be the first time I've been accused of using euphemisms and taking it too easy on people. To the previous caller's point, I did sort of laughed a little bit. I suppose it is possible that the city council's kind of Republican leadership could have become late blooming environmentalists. Mm-hmm. I am skeptical in the extreme that they are fellow travelers with the Sierra Club in the way that they are objecting to this natural gas plant. I do not think that would be the line of inquiry they're going to pursue. But who knows? Yeah.
I do want to move, Nate, to a topic that you reported on at the Florida Trib, because I know you've got to buck out it in a few minutes early. So this has to do with the size of the University of Florida graduate campus. Tell us what you learned through public records.
Yeah, so one of our education reporters, Michael Vasquez, made a public records request some time ago, just trying to learn a little bit more about what the city and UF's internal discussions look like around this planned graduate campus in a part of downtown. And what we got back were records that shed some interesting light on some back and forth between the city council auditors who review deals, incentive deals and taxpayer deals, and UF administrators. And they had some concerns around some of the, I guess what you could call minimum guarantees that are in place for this project. The auditors had questions, and ultimately, what is reflected in the deal is that this campus and UF are really only committed to enrolling 50 students in whatever it is that they build. And there is also, I think, a degree of flexibility in what the ultimate project looks like that I don't think has gotten a lot of public vetting. There is language in this agreement between the city and UF that looks like would allow UF to build something like a cancer center if plans for a graduate campus maybe don't sort of come to fruition. Now, UF has described that by saying, well, that's really if we want to build a medical facility that might supplement the graduate stuff we're doing, but I think the language reads broader than that. And so, I think what the story spoke to in some ways is the reality that the city and the state have committed a lot of public money to a project whose scope still remains pretty vague and also quite modest. And that's still the case today. I don't know that anyone can say with great certainty what we're actually getting in the end. Now, that story is also not a prediction. Like, this could end up being great. Our reporter spoke to a couple of experts who said that UF's presence in downtown, could still be quite positive. But the reality is that, what is being guaranteed is modest and again, unclear.
And just before you leave, would you say that is in some ways in keeping with the way that city government has done business in the past. I mean, kind of a lot of sometimes money invested in things without necessarily all of the details coming to fruition.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the experts that spoke to us said something to the effect of like, what this deal clearly reflects is that the city was very, very desperate to have UF just build something in downtown. And I think that general posture does often seem to be how the city negotiates with developers, is just build something. We will give you a lot of stuff to just do a thing.
Yeah. Well, Nate, we appreciate you joining us today. I know you got to jump, but thanks for coming on.
It's always my pleasure, and thank you.
All right. So, David Bauerlein, I want to ask you about that. This is obviously an issue that you've covered very in depth as well over the past year when this deal was approved by the city council. And it is not just city money that's involved. It is a element of state money. The city's also given a fair amount of downtown valuable property. Just what's at stake here in terms of the investment, as far as we know?
So I think it was $100 million from the city, $150 million from the state, and then $50 million from fairly well-connected, wealthy Jacksonville individuals. So adds up to about $300 million.
Okay. And so, as Nate noted, there is this possibility. The term campus use was expanded in negotiations with UF to include healthcare facilities like primary care or a cancer center, specifically is what it says, Obi. And so the auditors did ask that. They said, is it anticipated that this development could mainly be a cancer center? And the answer that they got from the DIA, the Downtown Investment Authority, was UF does not intend to develop large portions of the campus for these uses, but wishes to retain flexibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of how a lot of deals work, right? You want as much flexibility as possible. We want to be able to have as many options as possible. Obviously, and I guess full disclosure, I'm a UF law grad, but I think the city wants UF downtown. I think there's going to be some benefits here, but I also think UF is not going to sign up to be fairly scrutinized about what they're able to give, because they don't know what they're able to do yet. And I think they want to keep their options open. And that's what happens with the deal. I think the city is doing their job. The auditors are doing their job by trying to make sure that the city's going to get their value out of what they're getting. And I think those questions need to be asked, but I do think it's also very early, right? In what is going to happen. And so we'll see. It's going to take some time to know if the city's actually going to get their value out of this.
Yeah. Christina, one of the folks that the Florida Trib spoke to said, the value here is UF is a global brand. It is, putting on the city, it's that value. Certainly the renderings have shown this lovely downtown campus with a lot of people circulating. It may not be quite that expansive. So what do you think ordinary people's expectations are of this campus, given what we know, the level of investment? Do you think that when people are hearing it could just, at minimum, be required to have 50 students, does that match what the expectation is, either of people who are approving it or people who are looking forward to it?
Yeah, I think for people in the community and just those that we're speaking with, even just based off renderings alone, I think when you see renderings and then you hear 50, you're like, just a little, you're doing a little bit of that. But I also think that it is going to be a process, and it's, there are a lot of moving parts that will come with this. And I even think that we're saying projection for 2030 is like maybe more than 600 students. So it would be something that will take time with any project that does. But I do think that the community, based off when we first started doing stories, they were looking forward to it. Anytime, like kind of Nate was saying, when we hear Jacksonville is going to be getting something new, or we're trying to develop more things, or new autonomous vehicles, something different, people are like, okay, let's see what this is going to be like. It brings also extra spotlight to the city of people being like, oh, do I want to live in Jacksonville? Do I want to move here? Oh, they have this UF campus here. Okay, something new. So I just think over time we will be able to see. But I will say, I think the 50, and then, like I said, looking at the renderings, you do kind of do that moment.
Yeah. David Bauerlein, do you think that folks in the city who voted on this are aware of those back and forth questions that the council auditor was raising? Certainly a lot of people have described this as transformational for downtown, a catalyst for all kinds of retail and restaurant and even apartment buildings being needed downtown.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be transformational in that sense. It's a nice addition to downtown. It definitely brings another higher education institute there, and to the extent that it's got students there on a regular basis. To me, the main thing to watch for is how much research is actually going to be done at this campus. Because, with all respect to OB, I mean, University of Florida is a very great program, great school, and maybe having a master's degree in UF is a cut above, say, having a master's degree from the University of North Florida in terms of career advancement and all those things. And maybe it's a niche that's not available right now. But really, the whole idea was University of Florida is one of the biggest, most ambitious research institutions in the U.S. and maybe the world. And we're going to get a piece of that here in Jacksonville. So how much research actually does get done by their best and brightest here, as opposed to maybe it's still done at the mothership in Gainesville, and it's kind of spun off with a few applications here locally.
Interesting. Well, we should say that UF last year, their board of trustees approved moving their Warrington College of Business. It's going to be relocated, their 1- and 2-year MBAs to Jacksonville. That program had 40 students last year. So, that's on top of what they already have. And as Christina noted, they are projecting a fall launch of 316 students, with that becoming 677 by 2030. So it's just something that we'll have to watch. I do want to move on now to the state legislature, because there's a lot of issues that are happening, not necessarily in Tallahassee, but soon to be in Tallahassee. And Obi, I want to start this just with a disclaimer, noting that you are Michael Kerwin's campaign representative. You're working with him. He's running for Congress. He would obviously be impacted by congressional redistricting, but I do want to talk about redistricting because that's something that has been a pet project of the governor. He initially had called for that session to start April 20th. It's not happening. So what is happening with redistricting as far as we know? And remind us of some of the elements that are going into why the state's considering it.
Yeah, I mean, the state, it depends on who you ask why the state is considering it. The DeSantis will say there's difference in population. I think there's other people that will say this is purely political. But right now, nothing is happening on redistricting. According to my sources, there's no maps or anything, or people haven't seen those yet. And so he's pushed back the session another week. And at this point, there also isn't a budget. And so there's a lot not happening really in the state government. But really, the goal is to at least look at redistricting as a part of this special session. And I'm sure they've added 2 other things to this special session as well.
And the legislature so far has been like, we don't have any maps. We're not making any maps. Their expectation is the governor will draw the map and submit to them a map, which is essentially what he did the last time. They came up with a map. He shot it down, vetoed it, came up with his own proposal that added a couple of white favoring congressional districts. It eliminated a black majority access district. And this initially, when the topic was being bandied about, Republicans were hoping to gain 3 to 5 seats in a redistricting proposal. I understand that expectation has changed, and there is now some concerns that this could actually hurt the Republicans.
Yeah, I think there's people have issues on both sides of the aisle. Normally when redistricting is happening, it is done by the legislator. But because of DeSantis, how it happened last time, he's kind of taken the reins, right? And so they're waiting on him to deliver what he believes the maps are. But both sides, Republicans and Democrats, are worried about what these maps are going to look like. But Republicans are starting to speak up a lot more and saying that we don't know if these maps are even going to help us at all.
And David, there is some new projections that are being put out there, including by a name that is sort of familiar to those of us who've been following politics statewide. He's now a political consultant, Alex Alvarado. He was linked in with the whole ghost candidate thing for a time, but currently he has been looking at the impact on the GOP of a potential redistricting. He's found 3 seats that could be at risk that are currently held by Republicans. Representative Anna Paulina Luna of St. Pete, Corey Mills, who's got his own issues but is representing New Smyrna, and Laurel Lee of Tampa. All 3 of those seats could become vulnerable, he says. And now the seats that are competitive in the GOP could increase. That means like they also could be vulnerable from about 3 currently to 7. And so what would be the political motivation to move ahead at this point for the governor if there's seats in peril?
Yeah, it would seem to reduce the motivation to do that. And I think in Florida politics, too, the Hispanic vote went for Donald Trump really in pretty good numbers nationwide, I think in Florida as well. And so that pendulum seems to be swinging back among Hispanic voters, which I understand are not a monolithic bloc. So, then if you sort of assume that everything's going to go the way it did the last election, and let's draw a map to maximize our chances under the turnout and results of the last election, well, there's no guarantee that's going to happen again. And even the seat here in Jacksonville, the one where Aaron Bean's the incumbent, and there's some Democrats running to challenge him. I mean, that seat favors, I think, a Republican is kind of the idea behind it, but you don't know in a high turnout election who's going to turn out. And if you start to say, let's move around lines on that seat, maybe it sort of changes one way or the other in terms of Aaron Bean's reelection chances. So I think there's just this idea you can't take what the results were last time, draw a map on that, because the electorate is moving and changing. And I think in Texas, I've seen some results where they really changed all their districts, and now they're saying, well, some of those seats that Republicans won now are more vulnerable because of the way they've drawn those lines.
Christina, one thing that is unique about Florida compared to all these other states that have embarked on their redistricting efforts in anticipation of the midterms under pressure from the president, who is concerned about losing seats in the midterm elections, is that Florida law and its constitution, as amended by the voters, says you can't redistrict for purely political reasons, that it can do it based on population, new census data, but you can't do it simply to gain political advantage. And so it's been this sort of back and forth as lawmakers look to perhaps redistrict, but do it for quote unquote the right reasons. And so there has been, as Obi said, this idea that Florida's population has increased by several million people, but that information on a granular level is not going to be available for redistricting. And so they would be using the fact that the population's increased, but not necessarily any specific information about where that's impacted or how that should cause new lines. It kind of creates a little bit of a difficult terrain for lawmakers to make the claim that it doesn't have anything to do with politics.
Yeah, and I know I was seeing there were a lot of Democratic lawmakers that were calling it illegal, and they are very opposed to it due to people that are represented in certain Black majority groups where they would be heavily impacted by it. And then on the other side of it, even you just said earlier, I know the president was saying how he was pushing, Republican-controlled states to draw these maps out. So It would be interesting.
And there is a vote Tuesday, Obi, in Virginia that is consequential in this because Virginia is looking at a redistricting that could gain seats significantly for Democrats. Again, noting that you are working for a candidate, what does it mean for candidates who are thinking about a run or making their decision or are already running when the boundaries could shift? How do you plan for that? How do you strategize for that? Does it in any way interfere with what they're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely makes strategy, it definitely affects strategy. How much depends on how much the district changes. But
how does it impact strategy?
well,
Explain to us.
whenever you're deciding to run or looking at a race to run, you're looking at where your voters are, right? And who your voters are going to be. And so if you know that you're going to have this amount of voters, that changes what you can do for strategy. Outside groups look at districts and see which districts they want to support based on the numbers that they see that are plausible or not plausible. And so it affects a lot of things. I think it doesn't always affect general message or stuff like that, but it does affect how your money is going to be spent and how much money you need to spend in order to win a district.
Because an outside group might look at a close race where the numbers look like it could be a toss-up and say, well, we really want to invest to make sure our team wins. But if the numbers get even a little bit outside that, they might say, well, this is not winnable. We're not going to give you the money. We're not going to give you the door knockers.
And the same thing for an incumbent, right? On the other side is if you're a Republican incumbent, what it may have cost you to win a district may change if those numbers have changed for the worse for you. And so it's all a matter of kind of moving sands to see what you're going to do to get the best out of your district. But also people are, in a lot of ways, for the lack of a better term, looking to where to place their bets, right? And so looking to where they can spend the least amount of money and get the best kind of outcome.
And I guess we just at least have to say, David, we're well past the legislative session as it existed 60 days. There's still no budget. There's still no indication that they have an idea for the House and Senate coming together on a budget.
No budget. There's no mention yet of property tax reductions. That was the big thing. Let's get rid of property taxes at the local level. So it's it's a very weird thing to watch in terms of I love what Obi said. There's a whole lot of nothing going on,
exactly.
basically, and waiting to get to something where you go first. No, you go first. No, it's your move. You want to do it. Show us your cards. Tell us what you want to do. And I think a lot of it is they're just waiting for the governor who wants these things to come out and say, here's what I want.
Yeah.
And explain why.
It seems like there's a lot of politics happening and not a lot of governing happening. And so that's unfortunate for the people of Florida.
All right. I do want to shift gears to a story that you covered this week, Christina. This is a Putnam County commissioner who used a racist slur at a board meeting and then refused to apologize. I want to set it up with a little bit of sound, both from that county commission meeting in Putnam County and then from an interview that you did with the county commissioner who used this slur. His name is Walton Pellissier. You interviewed him after the fact, but let's take a listen to the meeting and then his response to you.
And I actually landed on the George H.W. Bush, which has now just been deployed to the Middle East in theater. So it's kind of neat to think that I was on that. It's over there flinging bombs on those. Sorry about that, but that's the way I feel about them folks.
That's all right.
That particular country. We got a lot of other good friends over there, but those are not our friends. Those are enemies.
I'm not going to repeat that word again. I still stand beside it. Don't misunderstand me, but I realize some people have taken offense, and I'm sorry for their feelings. They're evil. They're sick people. There's something wrong with them. And not that one day they could not be our friends, but at this point in time, they are our enemies. Our people over there fighting for our freedoms, and I didn't know you had to be politically correct during a war.
So, Christina, this is a question that he is standing by his comments, suggesting that pushback on that racist slur was politically, because he was being politically incorrect.
Yeah, I know. When I spoke with him immediately after when we started pursuing the story, that was naturally the first question that I asked. Are you sorry? What do you have to say to constituents? Because there were constituents, some were at this public meeting, some had seen the video by the time I was speaking with him, so he had already seen what people were saying on social media, and he doubled down on it. Like he said at the beginning of that sound, he's like, I'm not going to say it again right now on the phone, but he was like, I still stand with what I'm saying. He also said that he was referencing the Iranian regime. He's like, I'm not talking about everyone over there, just those that are in regards to the Iranian regime. So that was a big thing that also stood out.
Although to be clear, what he said in his original comments, he said, is that's the way I feel about them folks, that particular country.
Yes. Yeah. So that was kind of him at the podium, or him during the actual meeting. He did say that. And so that was something that really stood out. That's why we had to speak with him and ask him further his thoughts. I also reached out to the other commissioners as well. I have not had the chance to hear back from them because they also were sitting there. They were present when it happened. And when I was in the community speaking with residents, it was mixed reaction. There were residents that were saying, they aligned with what he said. They do believe that this is our enemy. But there were also residents that were saying, when you are in a position like this, where you are an official that people have elected, you do represent your constituents, and they were not in agreement with it.
Yeah. And Obi, it's worth noting the other members of that commission did not push back on those comments.
Right, yeah.
There was some giggling that happened. And when he said his sort of reflexive sorry about that, the board chair said, that's okay.
Yeah. I personally think it's pathetic. I think if you can have a view about what's happening in the war there, you can feel a certain way about your enemy, but to use those type of terms about a group of people, some of those people live in that community that are from that area, it really just shows a lack of empathy, but also a lack of intelligence to really group all those people together and to talk about them like that. As a public official, you represent a group of people, and to talk like that about them is disappointing. But also, you know, it's not winning a war by talking and slinging names around. You're just really adding fuel to the fire, but also maybe bringing persecution on people that are here from that area.
Yeah. We'll have to leave it there. Obi Umina, Christina Burgess, David Bauerlein, thanks for your reporting. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, you're invited to the cookout. We'll tell you what's on the grill at the James Weldon Johnson Park this weekend.
Cummer Museum presents a Spring Garden concert featuring Dustin Monk and The Hustle, presented by PNC. This band brings a blend of roots, blues, and funk to the museum's gardens on Saturday, April 18th. Tickets and information available at cummermuseum.org. Wolfson Children's Hospital, where generations of families have found hope. Because it's here at Wolfson Children's where answers are found, odds are beaten, and comebacks begin every day. Wolfson Children's, always here. Visit wolfsonchildrens.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.
When a person's size becomes the focus of a diagnosis, what gets missed? How weight bias in healthcare negatively impacts young patients. On the next What's Health Got to Do with It?
On the next Florida Roundup, redistricting. Governor Ron DeSantis called for a special legislative session to redraw Florida's congressional boundaries. Texas did it months ago. So we'll have a live simulcast between Florida and Houston to talk about changing political boundaries and the shifting consequences ahead of the midterm elections. Should Florida's congressional boundaries be redrawn this year? Email us radio@thefloridaroundup.org. I'm Tom Hudson. Then be sure to join us Friday, noon until 1.
The Trump administration sends thousands more troops to the Middle East, hoping to pressure Iran into a deal. Will it work? On the next Friday News Roundup, Eric Swalwell resigns from Congress and drops from the California governor's race after allegations of sexual assault. Also, Americans are getting bigger tax refunds this year. How far will those dollars stretch in this economy? Next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. It's a citywide celebration in Jacksonville's most historic public park. Here to tell us about the all-day cookout this weekend is the event's producer, Jeremy Rackett. Thank you for being here.
It's wonderful being here. Thanks for having us.
And Rackett is how I should be saying it.
Rackett.
Okay, Rackett.
Goodness.
All right. Jeremy Rackett, it's a pleasure having you. Thanks for doing this. Sarah Doherty, United Way of Northeast Florida, the event sponsor. Sarah, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So this is a citywide celebration, as we mentioned. The neighborhoods are all over the city, a large city. So, Jeremy, just start by telling us who all is included in the cookout celebration.
Outside of the performers and entertainers, of course, we have 9 neighborhoods represented in the park. So we're turning the park into a live map of Jacksonville.
Okay.
We're working with the City of Jacksonville Neighborhoods Department, who helped us to bring in community partners that does amazing work with our community. Celebrate. Arlington will be there. The Ritz will be there represented, Jacksonville Public Library, but also other groups like
I see Mayport's on the list.
Yeah, Mayport is on the list. We also have ViStar that will be there represented as well. Alzheimer's Association will be present as well. And there's and many, many more that will be present to help us celebrate.
And so are the different neighborhoods that are represented going to be represented by certain elements of their community? Like, are we going to be able to get ourselves some Mayport shrimp if we go to the Mayport booth? Are we going to be able to get some signature, West Side barbecue if we go to the West Side booth?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know about Mayport shrimp specifically, but we do have many food vendors representing different parts of our city that will be there, including, of course, barbecue.
Yeah.
So we're really excited. What this is a way for us to come together and just celebrate who we are uniquely as Jacksonville as a whole, bringing us to one spot to enjoy a fuse of music, dance, culture, and fellowship.
Yeah, and folks watching our live stream can see some pictures of the previous cookout. This event is meant to appeal to obviously the broad range of communities. Sarah, this is something that is designed for everybody to participate in.
Absolutely.
But it is, a city that has so many unique identities and so many different parts of town that really are distinct and very defined.
Yeah. And, that's one of the reasons why United Way wanted to get involved in this event is the event tagline is Unity on the Block, and Unity and United is in our name. We love bringing people from every corner of Northeast Florida together to celebrate the uniqueness of our community. And we're just really excited to help James Weldon Johnson Park and all of the partners involved bring this to fruition. Have a great day of celebrating all of the cultures and communities across Jacksonville.
I saw one of the food trucks that's going to be there, the Honey Drippers, which is got a very strong East Side identity.
That's right.
But also is very much a flavor of Jacksonville. We've done segments on it before with just the history of the Honey Dripper and kind of how that became a signature sweet treat for Jacksonville. That's one of the ways culinarily that the city has a little bit of distinction sometimes hasn't always been known for that, Jeremy.
Right. Yeah. And I remember as a kid growing up having the Honey Dripper lady at the end of the street, and so we wanted to create a vibe that embraces a bit of nostalgia as well. And so bringing in food vendors, being intentional about who even we bring in for food vendors went into this process.
There are also going to be all kinds of events. I mean, in addition to the food trucks, and we mentioned barbecue, there's going to be gourmet boiled peanuts, which is very Jacksonville ring about it. There's going to be cocktails for people who want to engage in that. And then there's stuff for kids, including mini golf and a coloring stand. There's going to be a karaoke sing-off, I understand, and then some live music. Is that right?
Karaoke sing-off, live music, the cat's downstairs. They're our headliner. We have a special performances as well from the community. Skate Hers will be present.
What is Skate Hers?
Skate Hers is a wonderful organization that works with young girls, and they do performances literally on roller skates. Oh, cool. They were last seen with us with the tree lighting. Okay. But what a wonderful group.
Oh, I would love to check them out.
Yeah.
I'm jealous they can do that.
I know. When you see them, you're just,
I
mean, you really think you're up there with them.
Yeah, I'm excited. That's good.
Yeah.
And Sarah, this is an all-day event for folks who haven't been to James Weldon Johnson Park. That's right at the foot of City Hall in the city center.
Exactly. Yeah, heart of the city. And that's one of the other reasons why we just thought it was a perfect fit, bringing everybody together in the heart of the city. And, coincidentally, James Weldon Johnson Park was the place of the first United Way rally in 1924, over 100 years ago. So it's just a special place for United Way, but also for Jacksonville and Northeast Florida. So we're just thrilled to bring everyone together for a good time.
A lot of history. Well, the cookout at James Weldon Johnson Park is April 18th. It goes from 2 to 7. Jeremy Rackett, Sarah Doherty, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Sure. And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have comments, suggestions for a future segment, you can go to firstcoastconnect.org, sign up for our newsletter, and submit comments or questions or any kind of feedback. First Coast Connect is produced by Stacey Bennett. Our associate producer is Isabella Casapow. Our show's directed by Brady Coram, and our theme music is performed by Club de Belugas. Join us Monday when we talk to the St. John's River Keeper about the state of the watershed. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT.
Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Congaree & Penn, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpenn.com.